The sky was dark, and the streets were soaked with rain. Thomas pulled his worn-out jacket tighter around his shivering body as he stood outside the bakery, holding a paper bag with the only meal he could afford that day. A single piece of bread, warm and soft, meant for his daughter. Just as he turned to leave, he noticed her, a little girl no older than 6, sitting alone on the curb, her hair drenched, her lips trembling, her eyes wide and scared. She looked up at him with silent desperation. She hadn't said a word, but her eyes begged for something. Food, warmth, safety. Without a second thought, Thomas bent down and handed her the bread. His own stomach groaned in protest, but something told him this little girl needed it more. He had no idea that this single act of kindness, of giving away his last meal, would turn his life upside down. Because the little girl he fed? She was the missing daughter of a billionaire. And by the time the truth came out, the world would know his name. Before we dive into this powerful, life-changing story, make sure you hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us till the end. Because what happens next will leave you speechless. Thomas Reed was once a proud man. Not rich, but proud. A skilled mechanic, he'd worked in the same garage for nearly 2 decades. He loved engines, the smell of grease, the satisfaction of solving mechanical puzzles. But when his wife passed away during childbirth, everything changed. He became a single father overnight. With no family nearby and childcare far too expensive, Thomas had no choice but to leave his job and stay home to care for his newborn daughter, Lily. He tried part-time gigs, delivering newspapers at dawn, repairing bikes in the evening, anything to scrape by. But the money was never enough. As Lily grew, so did the bills. Rent, food, school supplies. He sold his tools, then his old motorcycle, then even the wedding ring he swore he'd keep forever. Still, some nights he went to bed hungry just so Lily could eat. People whispered about him at the corner store. The same man who once fixed their cars now patched holes in his shoes with duct tape. But Thomas never complained. His eyes held a quiet strength, and his arms never stopped holding Lily close. On the night he gave that last piece of bread to the girl in the rain, Thomas was down to his last few dollars. He didn't know how he'd buy groceries the next day. His stomach was empty, but his heart, it was full of something else. Compassion. He didn't know her name. He didn't ask. He just gave. And walked away into the night, unaware that someone had seen it all, and that someone was about to change his life forever. The next morning, Thomas woke up to the usual ache in his stomach. Not from hunger, though he was hungry, but from anxiety. Rent was due in 5 days. Lily's shoes had holes. The electricity had been flickering. He got dressed, bundled Lily for school, and walked her the 2 miles to the local elementary. On the way home, he stopped by the diner where he sometimes helped with minor repairs in exchange for meals. But today, the owner shook his head apologetically. "Sorry, Tom. Nothing today." He forced a smile. "That's okay. Thanks anyway." He turned to leave when a sleek black car pulled up outside. The door opened, and a sharply dressed man stepped out. Behind him was a woman in a designer coat, her face familiar, hauntingly so. It was the same girl, the one he gave his bread to in the rain. But now, she didn't look lost. She looked powerful. She walked up to him slowly, her eyes searching his. Then, without hesitation, she spoke. "Are you the man who gave me food in the rain?" Thomas looked confused. I don't know. I've given a few folks food." She smiled. "It was me. That night, I was testing something. Life. Humanity." Thomas stared at her, trying to understand. Then the man beside her spoke. "She's my daughter," he said firmly. And that night, she chose to walk among strangers, to find one good person in this city. "You were that person." Thomas blinked. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," the man said. "You did what most wouldn't. And I make it a point to reward good men." Before Thomas could reply, the man handed him a business card. "A name. An address." "I own Reedworth Motors," the man said. "Ever heard of it?" Thomas nodded. It was one of the largest automotive chains in the state. "We want you to come work with us." as head of our community garage initiative. A real salary. Benefits. Housing if needed. Thomas looked down at the card, then up at Lily's drawing poking out of his pocket. His hands trembled. This couldn't be real. But it was. And in that moment, standing outside a diner he couldn't afford to eat at, Thomas realized that life was shifting. The storm hadn't passed completely, but for the first time in years, there was sunlight breaking through. The first week at Reedworth Motors felt like walking into a different world. Thomas was given a fresh set of coveralls, a badge with his name on it, and a corner office in their community outreach wing. A small but warm space that overlooked the shop floor. His job wasn't just to fix cars, it was to train, mentor, and hire other struggling men like he once was. Men who just needed a break. He couldn't believe it. His daughter, Lily, was transferred to a private school nearby. She now wore shoes without holes, carried a backpack that didn't sag from broken straps, and came home with stories that made Thomas tear up. "Dad, they have chocolate milk at lunch, every day." In the evenings, they walked home together through the now-safe neighborhood where the company had arranged for them to stay. A modest but cozy apartment in a gated compound. The walls were freshly painted. The taps worked. And best of all, Thomas no longer had to sleep with one eye open. At work, he poured his heart into the garage. He hired a man who'd lost everything to medical debt. A single mother who was once denied jobs because she looked too tired. A teenager who'd aged out of foster care. Each hire reminded him of where he'd been, and how one act of kindness had rewritten his future. Reporters came by after a local news outlet picked up the story. From homeless father to director of hope, the headline read. One day, during a community event, the billionaire father of the girl Thomas had helped approached him quietly. "You've built something here," the man said, glancing around the garage buzzing with laughter and purpose. "Not just a repair center, a legacy." Thomas smiled humbly. "I just needed a chance. Now I'm giving others what I never had." The man nodded. "We'd like to expand. Nationally. And we want you at the helm." Thomas was speechless. From sleeping in his truck, to leading a nationwide initiative. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, he stepped outside onto the small balcony. The stars were out, a clear sky, no rain in sight. He thought back to that moment when he tore his sandwich in half for a stranger. He hadn't done it for praise, or recognition, or some cosmic reward. He had done it because he knew what it felt like to be hungry, to be unseen. And now, he was seen, heard, needed. Thomas exhaled slowly and whispered, "Thank you." Just when life seemed perfect, the storm clouds rolled in again. It started with a phone call. Thomas had been in a board meeting for the upcoming expansion when his phone buzzed repeatedly. He stepped out to find Lily's school on the line. "There's been an incident," the principal said. "Please come immediately." His heart dropped. When he arrived, Lily was sitting outside the nurse's office, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "She collapsed during PE," the nurse explained. "We've done some basic checks, but she needs to see a specialist immediately." The hospital ran tests. Then more tests. Days passed in a blur of worry and sleepless nights. Finally, a diagnosis. A rare autoimmune disorder. Treatable, but aggressive. The treatment plan would be long, intense, and expensive. Thomas sat in the sterile hospital hallway with his head in his hands. For the first time in years, fear came crashing back in. The company's insurance only covered so much. The special medications weren't fully approved. Clinical trials were limited. Every option came with fine print and astronomical costs. And time. Time was something they didn't have the luxury of. The very job that had saved him, the one that demanded his attention around the clock, was now pulling him away from the one person he loved most. He was forced to cancel speaking engagements, delay expansion meetings, and for a moment, even considered resigning. Everything he had worked so hard to build now hung in the balance. He spent nights sleeping in a plastic chair beside Lily's hospital bed, holding her hand, reading her bedtime stories aloud even when she was too tired to respond. His soul ached, not just from the fear of losing her, but from the helplessness. The same man who had once fixed broken engines, broken spirits, and broken systems could not fix this. The nights were long, the days even longer. But Thomas didn't leave Lily's side. He became a fixture in that hospital ward, not just as a father, but as a fighter. He researched tirelessly, called every medical contact he had, reached out to hospitals around the world. He didn't wait for miracles, he chased them. Eventually, his persistence paid off. A pediatric research hospital overseas was running a cutting-edge trial, one that could help Lily. It was risky, it was experimental, but it was hope. Within days, Thomas pulled the necessary strings and flew Lily across the ocean. And slowly, she began to heal. Her energy returned in small bursts, a smile here, a giggle there. Eventually, she started sketching again, drawing suns and stars and wildflowers, like she used to. 6 months later, the doctors cleared her to return home. The day she walked out of the hospital holding his hand, Thomas cried, openly, unashamedly. But it didn't stop there. Instead of diving back into business, Thomas made a bold move. He launched a foundation, Lily's Light, dedicated to helping children with rare conditions get access to life-saving care. Not just in the US, but globally. He used his story, the flat tire in the rain, the kindness of a stranger, the daughter he almost lost, to inspire donations and corporate backing. Celebrities picked up the story. News outlets ran features. In less than a year, the foundation had funded 147 treatments for children whose families couldn't afford them. Thomas became more than just a CEO. He became a symbol of second chances, not just for himself, but for others. One evening, he drove past that same roadside where it all began, where a flat tire had changed the course of his life. He pulled over, stepped out into the soft drizzle, and smiled. Because he finally understood. Sometimes, the rain isn't there to ruin you. Sometimes, it's there to wash you clean and begin again. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. And don't forget to subscribe to SoulTwist Stories, where every tale reminds you that kindness, hope, and love can change everything.